Share your thoughts on our social media platforms that will be scrolling down on your screen shortly. But first, let's get to this discussion and my guests in studio. Guests, I should say, one in absentia, one in person this morning, is Mary Kio, who is the Director, Roshani Consultancy Services. David Kenneth Kaunda is joining us shortly. I understand he's already here to forge ahead this discussion. Good morning, Mary, and thank you for making time for us this morning.
Good morning.
The very genesis of our discussion this morning is the media free?
I don't think that the media, okay, there are two ways to answer this. There's freedom for the media and there's no freedom for the media. And I'll start with the one where the freedom comes in. The freedom has come in terms of the various media institutions such as the Media Council of Kenya, the Kenya Union of Journalists, Kenya Editors Guild, and many other associations of media women in Kenya. I could go through all the lists of all of them coming together and pushing towards the freedoms for the journalists that they need to have. You know, like if you come into the room, you have the editorial policies laid out for those which have them. And even if you have a problem, even with the public or within the media house, then you also have an opportunity to air out your grievances and are able to tell your stories, knowing that you have the backing of media.
We'll speak of the freedom within. Let's get to the freedom without. Does the world see the media as a free entity?
Well, yes, they do. Actually, there is freedom that they see in terms of how we're able to tell the stories that we didn't believe in the past could be shown on media. For instance, even the fact that we're able to invite political figures into our newsrooms and have hard-hitting kind of conversations with them already expresses some form of freedom that the media has. But on the other side, that's on the positive, but on the negative, we will see that at times it feels like the media is being gagged, like they're not able to speak out on some of the issues we'd like them to address.
You will say the media is being gagged by who?
I mean, it feels like as much as the policies we have in place within the country have given freedom, it also seems to be taking some of it, because in the eventuality that a story comes out that seems to step on the political class of the day in a certain way might lead to some repercussions, you know. For instance, advertising might be pulled out in case the government was giving advertising to a particular station. If a particular journalist from that group is too hard-hitting, it might affect some of these things. And especially when we look at it not only from the national government point of view, but also the county government point of view and the county stations and the stations that are based at the counties.
We'll touch on that. Devolution, of course, has devolved the media as well. We have local dialect-based radio stations, TV channels. But when we say the media is free, yet we operate within laws, we operate within editorial policies, just as we have one here at TV47. We operate within policies, acts by the Media Council of Kenya. It surely doesn't give the freedom a sense of what it is, isn't it?
Well, freedoms cannot just be given without any rules guiding it. And I believe that when the media houses have these editorial policies, it's for guiding to make sure that if it goes against the rule of law of the country, then you are taken care of so long as you are following the editorial policies. So for me, I don't feel like the editorial policies stop the journalists from doing what they're supposed to do. I believe if you may allow me to just go back to the past,
fair enough.
When we had only one party state in this country, and anything you said then was anything you said against the leader of the country was considered as wrong, so long as you are within the media house. But even then, they would find ways of telling the truth in such a way that they wouldn't be hit back. And I believe that these are the same editorial policies that are able to guide them. If you stand for truth, accuracy, impartiality, that's what you'd argue out even in the worst case scenario. So for me, I don't think that is something that we should say editorial policies are stopping us from freedoms. If anything, they're just giving us guidance as to where our freedoms lie.
Fair enough, Mary. We talk of the truth, an obligation to the audience. We talk of being where others are not reporting on things as they are. Those often, to a person who is not in the industry, they sound very impressive words. But when you watch the media, it doesn't always translate to that. It's not always that we tell the truth.
I think the other reason why the media is at times is not seen as telling the truth is because of how citizen journalism has raised up in our country today. So, and the disadvantage that those within the media house have is with regards to before the editorial policies guide you, and you can't just run with a story until you verify and everything else goes on. So by the time you're going through the processes of verifying your story, the citizen journalist is already being watched by various people across the country. And if by the time you were running with your story, you only had a development and approved by the editors to a certain point.
Who bear responsibility for whatever goes wrong.
Yes, whatever goes wrong. The citizen journalist might have another angle to the story on something that they are not, they're not afraid to share because they're not tied up by the editorial policies. So that's where probably the people might see journalists as not telling the total truth and not looking as being totally free, because the citizen journalists are running with it and are scooping you and making you look bad in the process.
Is media freedom, in its own sense, an illusion then, if at all stories are decided by, you said, if there's a politician who owns a certain media house, of course there wouldn't be a negative story about him. The markets, you talked of advertisement. If at all there are these strings pulling the media as though there's gun on the head, does that mean media freedom is partly an illusion?
Yes, yes. I would agree and no. Every part of this I'll say yes and no. So the yes aspect of the illusion is that we do have, the illusion in the media is that they do still provide the right information, yeah? I think just run that question through me again.
The question is, we say the media is free, free from external interference. Yet we have the markets that play. We have the political class and ownership of the media that makes decisions. Is that freedom an illusion to an extent then?
Yes, to an extent it is. Because when you have political interference, when a journalist, for instance, runs with a story, and allow me to go back to the county level, is that they will be threatened because the politician who is threatening them from the county levels knows where they live, knows where their family members live. So in that case, then that illusion is messed up in that regard. Or even in the situation of where some stories have to run and the owner might be in a situation where they need to be mentioned, but they can't be mentioned by the individual journalist because the owner cannot be mentioned in a bad news about when it's going out there.
Isn't that then a contradiction on our side as journalists, that we owe the first obligation to our audiences, but we still have some hindrances in as far as decimating that information is concerned?
I believe it's important for an individual to think first about their lives and about that is the most important. It doesn't matter how great your story is, but if you're not going to be alive to tell it, then the illusion of whether there's freedom within the press now it becomes to an individual aspect to it, and there's a challenge in that. And it's something that we can't run away from. And it's not just county media that is affected, also the national mainstream media are also affected by the same thing.
Fair enough. Mary, in your own description, what would media freedom entail? A free media.
A free media is where a journalist or a media house can report on issues without the fear of backlash for telling the truth. That is my ideal. But in reality, we know that doesn't always happen because truth at times is based on the interpretation of the person receiving the information. So so as much as a journalist might want to run with the true story, they have to think of the repercussions of the audiences and how it affects them in the long run.
You talked of the one-party era where the government, in many sense, was the editors of these media houses as well. They could decide on what goes first. I'm told, according to my research, I'm informed that some media houses used to send their rundowns just for approval to certain state agencies. That is not the case today. Does that give an impression that as democracy opens, the media too is opening?
Yes, it is. It has opened very much. I mean, going back to the issue of how we are able to interview even these leaders, parties of state. I mean, leaders of the state, that you can actually call them to the media house and do that. We couldn't do that in the one-party period.
The media has also been accused of giving them political fodder, that they come to our stations to get the numbers,
yes,
to be watched by people. Hence, that translates to literally a vote, if they're impressive.
That is true. Now that brings again the issue of the freedom of the journalists. It's curtailed to the extent of when you have the leader of the state coming into your media house and seems to avoid most of the questions of maybe probably accountability that you're posing towards them, then that would become a challenge in the long run in terms of the freedoms that you have, despite us having made so many changes towards freedom for the journalists to even have these politicians within the newsrooms. But we shouldn't only look at it in terms of freedom, with only terms of what is it called, of only leaders of politicians and that kind of way.
Just for purposes of curiosity, when you say you have these politicians in the newsroom, what exactly do you mean? No,
I just mean in terms of they're able to come and you're able to engage with them. Before, I think whatever they said was law, and they could just make, the thing in the past is that media was supposed to cover to cover what the politicians said without questions. But now we have the opportunity to bring them on board and ask questions.
And are we as the media asking the right questions?
Well...
We ask questions, yes, but are they right questions?
Well, at times they seem skewed, and at times they do ask the right questions, because there are those journalists who ask the right questions, and when they do, they never get the answers that they're looking for, because I don't know, I think the politicians have managed to get this special way of avoiding the real issues that they need to address. So in that way, it becomes a challenge. But yeah, we've invited them into the newsroom and they're able to talk about it more.
I agree with you when you say the media landscape in Kenya has opened over the years. The number of radio stations doubled in the last 10 years. The number of TV stations has increased nearly by a quarter. The number of media outlets are increasing, but is that as well reflected on the kind of information that the media is giving?
No, not necessarily, because again, we go back to the issue of ownership. Who owns the media, and how does it affect the kind of content that goes out to the people who are out there? If it's owned, again, by the same politicians, some of them are owning some of these media houses, and so they have to serve the interests of those politicians. And so that becomes another challenge. Again, who is invited to advertise more at a particular media house also becomes another challenge.
You talk of the political ownership of the media. On this show, we critique ourselves just as we critique everyone. The two Kenya's leading founding, if not families, own in somewhat some quarters the media. The Mois own, of course, the Standard Group. The Kenyattas as well own the media. Given that these are political families that are their presence, I mean, is of essence to the country and to their own political journeys. Yet we have a media that they own. Clearly, one can easily judge the entire media for giving an information about these families that is somewhat bent towards their side, if at all they own the media.
I believe the audience now, because of the opening up of the media space, and we're able to know who is behind owning the various media houses, the audience have opened their mind to knowing that if it's this particular station, you know what to expect from it. You wouldn't expect them to be critical of their owners. And in that regard, then it becomes, it's not acceptable norm, but it's like, that's the way things are. And so people know where to move to in case you need to find out a story about that particular politician. Don't go to their media house. You go to another media house and see what they have to say about them. But again, whatever information you're getting from another media house, you also have to still think about who is backing them up. Is there somebody who is aligned to an opposition political person to the politician who belongs to the media house of where you want to get the information from? And then in that case, I believe the audience now is opening up and realizing, is this propaganda? Where is this being objective? Or is that really a good point that a journalist has brought out?
And if the audiences are already questioning the information some of these outlets are giving because of their political or economic bias, then is journalism not treated as a gimmick that is between interests?
Yes, it is. It is a journalist within gimmicks. But let's at least give credit to those who try to go out of their way to be seen as following the editorial policies as much as possible and what the people expect of them. Because I believe, like the investigative journalists who have arisen today, have stepped into that space and are trying to tell the true stories that we don't get from many other media houses because of the biasness that they have. Well, at the end of the day, you can't. I think this is it's. When we talk of freedoms, it's usually quite tough in terms of when the journalist has to think of where their food, where they butter their bread, and the kind of content that's out there. And people know that if we can't get the content from the media houses, we have the alternative voices, and the alternative voices, we can listen to them and then try and make our own kind of judgment on what we think is right.
And with the increase in the number of media outlets, the diversity as we see as it is of now, what is the importance of having such many media houses?
Well, the first thing is that it brings the issues closer to the people. I think before, when we think about the time when we only had one broadcast station.
Or state-owned.
The state-owned, in fact, that's a better word to use, a state-owned broadcast station. And then you have all these media houses that are based within Nairobi and out of Nairobi. Telling stories of the people on the ground makes it easier than when we just had to wait for a 1-hour slot and try to get every other county involved in the conversation and getting to know what's going on the ground. But in this case, when we have all these media houses reporting from different parts of the country, then we are able to get as much information as we can on what is going on the ground. And I believe for those who are involved in various sectors, be it in the non-governmental organizations, government organizations, we're able to track on issues around accountability, what is going on the ground, and finding recourse where possible and making the necessary noise if need be, so that the right procedures can be followed if something is not going right.
Fair enough. With the increase in numbers, and we talked about the county-based reportage that we have as of now, hasn't that as well created a sense of ethnicized media, that this is our media? For instance, if I am from Mandera, which is my home county, and we have a media house that operates within there, that is ours. It's not necessarily the voice of Kenya.
Well, that is where now the editorial policies need to come back into place. Because if you look back even at the 2007-2008 post-election violence, that is when we are just having quite a number of these media houses coming up in terms of the vernacular media houses. And of course, when people report and when they hear you, let's say like people from Mandera hear you, they're like, hey, there is our man, you know. And whatever you say at that time, the responsibility that goes back to the journalist in terms of what you report. Of course, they'll identify with you and will believe everything that you say because you're our person. But that's where now the onus of the media house comes in terms of how well can you be seen as being as impartial to the information. And that's why I really loved what the Media Council of Kenya, the Kenya Union of Journalists is doing in terms of empowering the journalists to be able to know their rights and to know where their rights also stop in terms of what you report and the repercussions that can happen to you. I believe even looking at what transpired at the International Criminal Court at The Hague also set up precedents in terms of what these ethnicized kind of media houses and how they can report and how they can engage with their audiences to make sure that we are checking this wanton freedom, if you were to call it that.
Mary, hold on that thought. I understand we need to take a short break here on Newsroom. We'll be back after this break with this discussion and other stories that are making our headlines at this hour.
Twende sasa.
Nipe countdown. 2, 1.
Nakuletea matangazo moja kwa moja kutoka kongamano la 6 la ugatuzi hapa Kirinyaga County.
Hapa ni mjini Meru.
Tupo katika eneo la Waitavia County ya Kiambu.
Hivi leo tuko Nairobi Cinema.
Hapa ni Kina, ukipenda Kinango.
Usiwache hiyo dream ipotee.
Kama huyu amekataa, tafuta mwingine, maisha isonge mbele.
Mabadiliko haya yangali yanazua msuke baina ya washikadau.
Baadhi ya changamoto hizo zilikuwa ni kama vile ukosefu wa maarifa.
Wameweza kupeperusha bendera ya Kenya.
Tutaingia kwenye mapumziko kidogo.
Chavi! Na hii, mpenzi mtazamaji, ndio
TV47,
macho na sauti yetu.
Katika kaunti 47, mitaa mbalimbali, watu wana mitazamo tofauti.
Wajana ni wengi, kama maisha, kama huyu amekataa, tafuta mwingine, maisha isonge mbele.
Kisiasa,
naweza sema shida kubwa iliyoko kwenye sheria ya Kenya ni idara ya mahakama.
Masuala ya jamii.
Sasa anamdanganya na akona familia yake. Kwa hivyo sasa hawezi chunga familia na achunge msichana.
Mitindo pamoja na kibiashara.
Nikikaa nikwambie, wewe unipeleke na Rieng.
Nipeleke na Rieng. Rieng. Tunatembea pamoja katika kila kitongoji kusikiliza semi zao. Ungana nami Tony Mwirigi tupige gumzo pamoja ndani ya 47 mtaani hapa TV47, macho na sauti yetu.
Bila shaka mtaka cha mvunguni shati ainame. Hivi ndivyo mambo yalivyo katika kuanza na kuboresha biashara. Kipindi cha biashara za familia kitaangazia biashara zilizofua dafu na zinamilikiwa na familia.
Working with the family.
Kufanya kazi na familia si rahisi. Manake wakati mwingine wanakufinya na pia wana matarajio mengi.
They expect much from you.
Ungana nami Vanessa Ndavi ndani ya TV47, tutalii bahari hii pamoja.
In studio is Media Freedom. Share with us your thoughts and give us your insights. You as the viewer, do you think the media, TV47 included, is free to report on anything that we want to? And my guest in studio is Mary Kiyo, Director at Roshani Consultancy Services. Mary, thank you. We exhausted on the media freedom, and I want us to move from that specific topic. But before we do that, the media has been accused of misusing these freedoms. Are we?
Yes.
In what sense are we misusing those freedoms?
When, for instance, you have the press card in your hand and are able to walk into any meeting because you have the press card, at times when they get into these spaces, even when they know they might not run with the stories, they might at times intimidate the various people that are there in terms of, if you don't do 1, 2, 3, I am not going to run with your story.
Fair enough. Why should someone who is doing correct things in their own rightful minds be intimidated by a media that is there to cover a story, if at all what they're doing is correct and right?
Goes back to the abuse of the freedom by the journalist. The journalist might have some. For instance, if Abu Bakr was to come in and you're carrying on with your, you have your event going on very well, but I have something about Abu Bakr's personal life that if the people out there knew about it, I could swing that story to the media house and I know they can play it. So in that way, I see some of the abuse of freedoms by the media going on in such cases where they have some, or if they have dossiers against the people. So it might not be related to the event per se, but being used within the wrong context then makes it wrong. Otherwise, they should look for this particular person in a different forum and address the dossiers that they have against this particular individual. So that's one way that I see it.
What I'm getting from your response is journalists at times use their powers as journalists with their accreditations and misuse that.
Yeah, and also secondly, I believe there is the issue we never like discussing around the brown envelope and saying that if you don't give us something, your story is not going to run. So in that way, they're abusing their freedom. They've been given the freedom to go and cover these events. Why then does it become pegged to the brown envelope? I don't know whether now it's called brown envelope, blue envelope, others now say
still brown.
still the brown,
whichever color we give it.
So that also becomes an abuse of the freedom that you have to walk into a space and cover the story. So why should you ask for money if you know that, I mean, you've been sent here by your media house to tell the story. So why should you start threatening that if you don't allow us to do this, then your story is not going to run? And yet, you are called in for media coverage. It brings in a problem for those who have invited you for the event. They start wondering, okay, we also have to prove that we had media at our events, but now if they're threatening that they are not able to do our stories, and that becomes a challenge in itself.
And is there a pressure from organizations, from the market, to have media presence at the expense of wanting to pay few journalists to show that there was really a media presence at their own events?
Well, today, it's taking different forms. It's not now, there are some who don't call it necessarily the brown envelope. It's been made, there's a new innovation around it in terms of the kind of support they give you to tell a story. Going back to the issue of if you have to go all the way to Mandera right now to do the story, I'm not saying that TV47 does not have the budget. But in the eventuality, it didn't have the budget for you to go all the way. And there's an organization which said, we want you to do this coverage. Let's go with you on the ground. Then that's their way of taking care of you in a straight up manner, because it's declared at your media house and that kind of thing. So people are trying to look for cleaner ways of dealing with this requirement for money rather than leaving the onus on the journalists themselves.
Let's get to the point of citizen journalism, that everyone with a telephone, a smartphone, is now a journalist. They can document something and share it. What are the dangers in doing so?
First thing is verification. It's one thing for me to be in an area, for instance, if I was recording an accident, and make my quick deduction and just say, hey, this was a drunkard who drove into the wall, and I take a picture, and of course the person is staggering. But the journalist would go a step ahead and ensure that they talk to the various authorities, find out from the police in charge of the area who'll come to the scene to give their comment around the issue, and might even follow through the story up to the point of the hospital.
But we have equally seen, Mary, an instance where a media house shares the same picture as a citizen journalist, someone who was randomly picking photos at a road accident, sharing the same not so good photos. Doesn't that as well question the media?
That's just pure lazy journalism, in my opinion, because the journalists should know better. It's not about just picking up stories and running with them. But I think the other thing that is contributing to this is the breaking news aspect, where every media house wants to be the first one to break the news. And in that case, whenever you see it, especially if it's from a citizen journalist that you often follow, let's say like I was this reliable citizen journalist that you oftenly follow, and you find that my content is right. Over time, you might slip up because you're like, Mary's content is always right. And so run with it. But again, at the end of the day, my question would go back to the media house. By the time the journalist allowed that to be shared on air, I would question their editorial policies. Who is the person who is supposed to approve the content before it goes on air? And nowadays, there are so many software applications that we can also use to
check
verify
whether it's fake or not.
Exactly.
Mary, in a space where everyone can share whatever they want, and in this is in reference to the new media, the digital media, is the media facing a stiff competition?
Yes,
that you are taking long to break a story that someone has written an hour ago?
Yes, they are, but I still think that the media should take their time, because that's where the trust comes from. If they don't have the trust, then that becomes an issue in that regard. They need to, at the end of the day, as much as I look at various sites online of influencers, like we call them, and how they share their content, I always make sure that I counter-check it against media houses that I have seen over time tell the truth. So building trust, I think, is most important for a media house.
What I'm getting from you is that the bar of whether an information is correct or not is the mainstream media.
I didn't say mainstream media, I said trusted media.
Why would you be selective?
Because as we know, the thing is, now I'll put myself in the shoes of the audience, is that I would like to get content from the media house, trusted content from the media house that has proven itself over time.
And what does proving itself mean in your own context? You as Mary, as the director at Roshani Consultancy Services, what does proving mean?
Tells the truth as much as possible, is as impartial as possibly can based on the situation that is at hand. And facts have been quoted, you know, and various voices have been utilized in telling the story. So if I get those 4 minimum threshold, I have many more, but 4 minimum threshold, I'm good to go.
Fair enough. We talk of editorial policies. We have guidelines in the mainstream media, in the media. Citizen journalism has less regulations, if at all there is any. In a space where there is no regulation as such, and in a space where everyone can post and share whatever they want to, I want to understand what the dangers of consuming an information from such outlets are.
There are various aspects. One, damage that will be caused on all aspects, various sectors, economically, politically, socially, by running with what we just see on citizen journalism spaces. If, for instance, we were to say the water that we are getting from the city council right now is contaminated, and it could be, but I'm just saying, what if you were just to get that information? You can imagine all of us who just rely on taking water directly from the sink, I mean, from the taps, and the kind of effect that it will have, you know, it will raise fear, unnecessary fear, especially when it's not verified. If somebody has verified that probably where we get the water source, the dam where we get our water from, has some chemicals which have been let out without being, you know, filtered or that kind of thing. The kind of repercussions it's going to have on the people, the fear, everything that would happen, that comes socially, economically, it affects people, because if you know, you have to think of the repercussions of what just giving any kind of information without verifying would have on the people on all aspects, that I believe that editors think about before they let such a story run.
Fair enough. And has this made, therefore, everyone to be a journalist? If at all I can share an information, source for an information, make it public, everyone is literally a journalist in one sense or not?
Not a journalist. I wouldn't call them a journalist. I would just say source of information. A journalist still has their role to play, and goes back to the 4 things that I mentioned before. You have to build the trust, you have to use various kind of sources. If this person has done all that, doesn't mean that they're a journalist, because the only journalism that you can claim is within the citizen space, but not as the laws lay it out within the Media Council of Kenya, like, for instance, because they're the ones who now guide who should be called a journalist, who determines who becomes a journalist. But when it comes to citizen journalism, for me, I just leave it as a point of, they are point of sources and not journalists.
Should they be believed or not, depending on the kind of a story?
Well, that's a tricky one, because I know for myself, there are some of them who I do believe when their stories get out there. They can be believed if they are the only ones on the ground. You know, there are cases where if a situation was to take place and they're able to share the information live and then use them still as a source, then in that way you'd accredited, you know, in quotes, in terms of journalism, but I don't think we'd call them a journalist. We'd just say they are a source of the content that goes into media spaces.
Mary, hold on that thought. I understand we need to cross over to Milimani Law Court, where currently, I understand the CS, Treasury CS Henry Rotich, has been presented this following the order by the DPP, Director of Public Prosecution, Nurdin Haji's demand and order yesterday that 28 individuals be arrested. The 28 were arrested. Among them was Kenya's CS, Henry Rotich. Let's get to Milimani Law Court and listen in what is happening there.
Henry Kiblagat Rotich, Kamau Duge, Kennedy Nyakundi Nyakiro, Jackson Jao Kinyadu, and Susan Jemtai Koch, and David Kitumba Kimoso. You have been jointly charged with willful failure to comply with applicable procedures and guidelines relating to procurement contrary to Section 45 2B and Section 48 of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act, number 3 of 2003. And the particulars of the offense is that between 17 December 2014 and 27 September 2018, the Cabinet Secretary, Principal and Head of Bureau 2 Division, Director in Resource Mobilization Department,
Well, we seem to be having a technical hitch there, but the court proceedings have begun. Remember, it is 28 individuals who the DPP yesterday ordered for their arrest, who are being arraigned today at Milimani Law Court. Among them is Henry Rotich, Treasury CS. Of course, this dating back to the genesis of the Kimwarer and Aror dams. The initial cost of those two dams was expected to be 46 billion shillings. The final cost was 63 billion shillings. An additional 17.6 billion shillings being the genesis of what the DPP has ordered for an investigation. Later, yesterday, tabling those to be arrested. We will monitor the happenings there and get back there once the court proceedings as well begin. Now, let's get back to our studio discussion, and she was joined us on set, David Kaunda, who is a communication consultant and a lecturer as well. David, thank you for making time for us.
Thank you.
We were talking about citizen journalism before you joined us on set. It is an area that I've read you write about, heard you speak about. Is there a competition between traditional journalism, what we see as a media, traditional media, mainstream media, and citizen journalism?
I think, on my side, I think what is there is not competition, but it is more of supplementing the need for news. But the supplementation of news comes at an expense of objectivity. The question that we should be asking, are our sources of citizen journalism objective enough so that we can rely on the news that we get from them? But I tend to think we don't ask such questions because we've got situations where mainstream media just picks something from the internet and broadcasts it as news content that is worthwhile for people to listen or watch or view, whatever it is.
What if this information is correct and accurate?
Information might be correct and accurate, but there are parameters that we have to look at. Yes, the information is correct and accurate, but does it meet parameters that are are worth it, because first of all, it is correct and accurate. Is it of human interest? Is it?
And in this reference,
is it timely enough? Yes.
And in this reference, the parameters are the journalistic parameters.
Yeah, you must. We have to look at the 7 values of news. Robert Blandon's values of news, in terms of, is it timely? Is it of human interest? Is it out of the ordinary? Is it factual? Those are factors that we have to look at. Yes, it can be factual, as you've said, but does it follow the tenets of news?
And in your own opinion, does the news follow those tenets, or we gloss over them as media?
I think, and I think I've said severally in different platforms, Kenyan journalism is pathetic. It's pathetic.
That's a heavy word to use. I think
that, in most occasions, what is supposed, the ethics of journalism practice and not followed in most cases. Whenever,
in most cases or in rare cases? Let's be fair, David.
In most cases.
In most cases.
In most cases. Sometimes you get in a situation where viewer discretion is supposed to be advised, a professional journalist will overrule that and present content that is quite disturbing to a national audience. So that is why I'm saying Kenyan journalism.
You say it is pathetic, but you are singling out one rare occurrence. Mary, is it a view that you share, that Kenyan journalism is pathetic?
Not always.
Those are strong opinions, aren't they?
Not always. And I'll give, for instance, there's a time when I remember there was a picture that was used of the Mungiki. There was a time when they were really being killed in the country, and it was carried on the on one of the major papers of this country. And later on, I remember the media house was put to task, and the editors actually said they allowed it. And this is where public interest overrides decency of the photo, because here it was showing all these people have been killed, yet it's not allowed to be seen. So at times we might
It's not, and we have the ethics, the guidelines, the policies.
Yeah.
But how will our audiences believe us if at all we are not given the pictures as they are?
Well,
don't we stand a chance of being questioned, our integrity and our information being questioned, if at all we don't present it as it should be?
Not always. There are cases. You have to make your case as to why you think that content should be shared as is. But if you can't make a case for it, then you've just overrode common decency right there, and even the right to privacy for the person who's actually been portrayed. Their picture has been portrayed in a negative way.
There are situations where on primetime television, I've seen Kenyan anchors ask questions that are not worth asking, and that is against the code of conduct and against the practice.
Shouldn't the media be free to ask whatever it wants to ask?
No, the media should be socially responsible. That's why we have social responsibility as a tenet of ethical journalism. You must do something that is for the greater good of the society, not something that will earn you after it.
Do it for the greater good of the society, even if it means lying to them.
No.
If a lie is a good to the society, we should all lie.
Lies can never be good to the society.
At times they are.
Lies are never good. Lies kill the basic foundation of journalism, because the reason why you're called a journalist is you have an obligation to speak the truth, tell everything as it is, but it doesn't mean tell everything as it is at the expense of the moral fabric, or at the expense of socio-moral fabric, what the society believes in.
David, you're bringing a very unique dimension to this discussion of morality, of ethics, of the idiom in which the media operates. if we are therefore to justify that the media is a free entity, yet it is operating within these guidelines, and this is the question I asked Mary earlier on, isn't that not an illusion that we are not free? We operate within laws, we operate within moral correctness of a certain society.
Freedom doesn't mean infringing on the rights of other people. Freedom doesn't mean infringing on the beliefs of other people, right? That's why even in our constitution, we have access to information and we have basic freedoms, but then these freedoms are limited. And access to information is part of the freedoms that we have. But these freedoms are limited to the point where you cannot disturb the existence of other people. You cannot curtail what other people, you cannot infringe on the spaces of other people. And it's like you cannot infringe on my religion. You cannot infringe on my basic rights, the basic rights that make me and you human. Yes.
Fair enough. Let's talk of the bodies. We have the Media Council of Kenya, we have the Kenya Union of Journalists, MCK and KUG in that reference. Are these bodies really serving journalists, or they are just as they are a name?
Well, I wouldn't quote myself on this. I would quote the journalists on this by saying, for instance...
And just to put as a disclaimer on this, we got to have the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya who pulled out late, but the show still has to go on as you answer.
Okay, so it's good you've put that disclaimer. And I'm also putting a disclaimer to my work with journalists is I do a lot of training with journalists. And one of the things that always comes up is they say, as much as Media Council of Kenya gives us all these guidelines, all these laws that you're supposed to follow, they don't seem to be fighting for us. Actually, they call them the backing dog, so to, and this I'm quoting what I hear from the ground. And they're like, yeah, it's one thing to always just shove it down our throats, but who is fighting for us? When we are, the only thing that you always tend to see is when we are called in for tribunals, when somebody comes on board and is claiming on an issue around, defamation or something like that. But in most cases, they don't feel like they fight for them. But my view is that over time, they have been able to do quite a lot from the past towards streamlining quite a number of things that are going on within the media houses right now.
David, let me get your thoughts on the same question. Are these bodies representing journalists?
We must understand that these bodies have distinctions in terms of roles, right?
Fair enough.
Media Council is supposed to regulate practice. KUJ is supposed to
advocate for the rights of journalists.
Advocate for the right of journalists and defend the journalists. So in my view, I think Media Council is trying the best they can to have proper journalism practice and to have objective journalism practice. Yes, they're not yet there because we are not in a utopian society, but at the end of it, I'll say they're trying compared to where we were in 2007 before the second schedule that brought in the Media Council. And as a regulator of journalism practice, and further wrote in, changed CCK into a communication authority, and even that we have a situation where sometimes KUJ misses it. They're fighting what is visible. I mean, they've done a journalist has done a mistake, and you see, this is a visible mistake, but they will defend that journalist.
Whether it is a mistake or not, shouldn't they not come to the defense of a journalist if at all they are a body that represents journalists. Evidence can only be adduced in a court of law. That can be charged in a court of law if the journalist did a wrong thing.
If the journalist did the wrong thing, I mean, if you're truly a professional journalist, one who's gone to journalism school, got through practice base, and you're able to understand the global parameters of what should define journalism, then whether you are a unionist or a regulator, you should know what is the truth.
Fair enough. Let me get your thoughts on this, that we have these bodies that regulate and advocate for the rights of journalists. Someone once told me, and this he said jokingly, that the media advocates for the freedom of others all entirely, except its own self. Is that the case?
That's true. That's true. A media should be like man-made messiah. Man-made messiah where I stand in for the people. I'm the gap between the people and the rulers. I'm the gap between the people and information. I provide the information that the society is lacking. That's why media should be given enough space to thrive, but then they should not misuse this space. They should use it to serve the people.
You say they should be given enough space. By who?
To thrive.
By who?
We have a government. And we have a government. If a government of the day fears is out to practice dictatorial tendencies, then they'll have to stifle the media and make sure its freedoms are curtailed. And that is what is not needed in a developing society. In a developing society, the media has to thrive for the economy and the social fabric, even the political spheres to thrive.
Fair enough. Mary, in your preamble, you talked about dealing with journalists in terms of training them in various spheres. Are the media houses themselves doing enough to train their specific journalists in an area that needs an expertise?
Yes, they are, in terms of they're open to training programs that usually tend to
And these training programs are external training programs?
Yes, they're usually external, but the training world is starting to move into what is it called, customized media trainings. So they come in and they have to find out what are the needs of the media houses and start addressing them rather than always bringing external information, because you realize when it's external, the buy-in is not as good. First, meet the requirements that we have as a media house so that they can be open towards external kind of training. So we have seen quite a lot of uptake around that, and I believe even the Media Council, KUJ, have been doing quite a lot of that. And if you may just allow me to just make a small comment with regards to his comment around KUJ charged with coming up, with dealing with the issues that are affecting the journalists. It's only in recent times that KUJ has been, starting to assert itself and been on. For a couple of years, there was a lot of wrangling that was going on within the KUJ. And so by the time KUJ is coming on board, you'll find that many people now are starting to form their own associations. Many people, in this case, being the media houses, they are different journalism groups. And they're always feeling like this one represents us better than we feel like they have, because they feel that it's a bit more centralized. But I do appreciate what KUJ is doing in terms of decentralizing the different kind of bodies that they're having.
I still want to stick on the point of training.
Yes.
If we have an organization that is training you on how to report and cover a certain area, and this organization has an interest in that area, shouldn't that not create a sense of biasness?
Well,
that you train me to report you.
Well, okay. How do you put it? For instance, I train.
We're not being specific to you.
Yeah, but I'm giving an example because I put myself out there. Is in terms of when you're conducting humanitarian training, we can't do it away from the normative principles of journalism. we still follow the same principles. It's the thing is, how do we train these journalists who are used to running for the news stories to have an eye on how to report on issues around humanitarian issues? And so it's not about moving them from the agenda or having a hidden agenda. It's about working within your strengths as a media house and not coming to bring in different rules of how you're supposed to report. It's just teaching you a new skill that you'll be able to add on and add on to your career as you carry on.
David, shouldn't this be the role of the media houses, that they train on areas of expertise rather than allow organizations to train journalists and send them to report on the same matters?
I think media houses should take responsibility and train their own journalists, because if we allow organizations that are not media houses to train our journalists, then we are interfering with objectivity. Then once we interfere with objectivity, we don't have news, we have public relations, right?
PR.
We have public relations. So then the information that they will be given is, they cannot shut down or they cannot speak wrong about an organization that trained their journalists. They cannot tell it as it is when the organization that trained their journalists is doing a wrong thing.
And Mary, are these trainings helping journalists? If yes, in what way?
Yes, they are. One, because as I agree with him, he says that they should do their own trainings, but the capacity of the media houses to have the various expertise to conduct these trainings, in most cases, might not be available. For instance, if you're bringing in, if somebody is training journalists on how to monitor the elections based on a new procedure that has been introduced in the Electoral Commission, they wouldn't train themselves. So that's where an outsider in this case would be appropriate to come on board, because they wouldn't have this new technology in order to do that. And so I feel that there's that space to allow external people, but they shouldn't come and bulldoze the media houses towards changing how they tell their stories objectively or anything. It's about building your capacity around it.
David, you teach journalism at the University of Nairobi. Many a times, journalists are told not to be part of a story. Have a link between you and the story. Report on the story, don't get yourself to that story. Why should it be so?
If you get yourself into the story, there is an element of bias, because there is a likelihood that you might develop emotions towards that story.
And what's wrong with having emotions with that story? If for instance, may God forbid, there's a terror attack somewhere, you see, for the lack of a better word, dead bodies around, and you get emotional and emotionally attached to that story. Is there anything wrong with that?
If you get emotionally attached to something, like emotions are, if, for example, if you love someone or if you hate someone, if you love someone, there's no time you'll talk evil about this person. But if you hate someone, even if that person is professional enough, there is a high likelihood that whatever you say is going to be negative, right? Just like if you are going to report terror, right now, and you don't like Fred Matiang'i, what you're likely to do is to
poke holes that the CS is failing.
Poke holes that the CS is failing.
And in the event that a story is so human as it is, that we have dead bodies there, of children who are crying, women and men who need help, shouldn't you not be part of the story?
You shouldn't be part of the story.
You shouldn't, or you should?
You shouldn't be part of the story. Your role is to report, and report objectively. You shouldn't be subjective in any way. If you're subjective, but once you say I want to be part of the story, that's the time you will allow yourself to capture the images of the dead bodies as they are and post them. But then if you're objective and you follow the tenets of journalism, then you will cover the story impartially.
Fair enough. Mary, he talks of the tenet of journalism, of course, as an academic, a lecturer, teaching all this in class. But does that match the reality as well on the field as a journalist?
No, it doesn't. Reason being is that we are human beings. So it's one thing, like if you were to follow through with the scenario where you say, I find dead bodies, there's a natural reaction with even how I tell my story, the kind of voice that I will use. I will not, by saying I should be impartial, I should be talking about it like this is what is going on without any form of emotion, which is impossible as a human being to do. I think the part that we should be pushing for is how, despite your vulnerability, you're able to tell the story. I think that's where the question of how the media covers the issue.
David, how do we delink the journalist, the person from the story?
I want to ask you a question.
You want to ask me or her?
Let me ask her because it's...
yes.
9/11. Did you see bodies?
No, we didn't see any bodies.
Was the coverage objective? Have you ever seen an American journalist or a British journalist speak evil or speak subjective about a terror attack?
And are you imposing the view that Kenyan journalists speak as of such when terror happens?
Kenyan journalists, in my honest view, when it comes to covering terror, they cover terror as and put government on the receiving end. And that is, and I'll keep saying, when you do that, you make the terrorist feel superior. And that's why, of this perspective, do not get emotional when you're covering a terror story.
I'll bring in taking you back to the issue of the 9/11. Yes, we didn't see any bodies. No, they didn't cry. But 3, they had the emotion that goes with the gravity of the situation that took place. And I think that's what we need to look at. It's not about I should have my tears flowing down my cheeks so that I can be able to tell a story. The issue here is this is a situation which is going on, and we cannot separate ourselves from it. Looking at how Kenyan journalists are actually responding on these issues, going back to the issue, to the fact that we are still having trainings going on. These are new things to us, so we are still having ongoing trainings, and I know Media Council of Kenya, among others, are training people about trauma and that kind of thing.
David, you alluded to the point of making the enemy as though they are superior, making them feel as though they are superior. If they have attacked an area and there's a report of an attack somewhere and the media reports on that, why shouldn't the media report on it in the name of patriotism, in the name of getting it right?
So, let me go back to 15th January this year. So, there's one paper, even though it's a free paper, it did have a very good headline.
Very good to you.
It's not very good to me. It's very good to any person who is a professional journalist.
And what are you using to judge a headline being a very good one?
You remember? The people had this heading, Kenya Unbowed. Others had gory images of blood and dead bodies. But the people had this, Kenya Unbowed. See, that enough to tell the terrorists Kenya is moving on despite the challenges that
if at all they're reading the papers, they'll get the message, of course, with the difference in the language that the story is written on. But my question is, should the media then be an agent of patriotism? If at all you don't want them to cover things as they are.
We don't say they should not cover things as they are,
But put a little bit of a caveat on what's happening.
My point is, when you're doing coverage, be socially responsible. And do not say we don't have capacity to be socially responsible. Because, I mean, it's a mistake that our newsrooms do. We pick every Tom, Dick, and Harry and get them into the newsroom.
I'll forgive you for using those words.
No.
Those are not impressive words to use.
It's a fact. We pick every Tom, Dick, and Harry, and then we say, because you're good in entertainment, we want you to come in and help us report news, forgetting that this person hasn't gone through a journalism school, and then you want to come to a television interview like this and tell us we don't have enough capacity. That is not the best way to do this. We should not always have blame game. Let us try and put things the straightforward way, in a way.
Even if that involves reporting on a terror incident that has happened in an area, put it as it is.
No, I'm saying, I'm not, you.
No, I just want to get the point through.
No, the thing is, get these people. If I'm picking someone who doesn't have a foundation in journalism, I may take this person through a few courses in journalism. And always remind this person that objectivity is the first thing, right? But in most cases, we pick people and just send them to cover. And once you are covering stories that are emotional, remember the people you're covering stories on have relatives and friends. Do anything that is good to everyone, right? And that is what we call Aristotle's golden mean. In that golden mean, you get between what is good and what is extremely wrong. So as you get in the middle, you'll not hurt, you're not pleased. You're just a professional, right?
You're just a professional, even if it means reporting on things as they are at the end of the day.
Reporting, you can report things as they are, but reporting on things as they are doesn't mean I infringe on other people's rights or I hurt other people's emotions. When a study that France was attacked, did you see any gory images? No. When Grenfell Towers...
at least we saw the flames on screen, yes.
You just saw the flames, but you never saw blood. You never saw dead bodies. It is because these people have relatives and we have to be considerate about them having relations, so we report it in an objective way.
David, I'll allow Mary to respond to that, but before that, I understand we need to cross over to Milimani Law Court, where the court proceedings are going on. This is in relation to the 28 officials and entities that were arrested yesterday following the order by the Director of Public Prosecution, Nurdin Haji, amongst them being Treasury CS Henry Rotich. Let's listen in to the proceedings that are going on at the moment at the courts.
Most obliged, John.
Kennedy Nyakundi Nyachiro, Jackson Njau Kinyanjui, Titus Murezi.
Well, those are images live from Milimani Law Court, where the court proceedings are currently going on. This is in relation to the order of the DPP yesterday. The 28 officials, amongst them Treasury CS Henry Rotich, be arrested. Genesis of it being the Aurora and Kimwarer Dam. The initial cost, just a reminder, was 46 billion shillings. The final cost, the DPP says, was inflated to 63 billion shillings, an additional 6 billion shillings to the final figures. Of course, we'll be crossing over as well later to Milimani Law Court. But it's time for us to take a short break here on Newsroom. We'll be back after this break with this discussion. Don't go too far. Stay tuned.
Bila shaka mtaka cha mvunguni shati ainame. Hivi ndivyo mambo yalivyo katika kuanza na kuboresha biashara. Kipindi cha biashara za familia kitaangazia biashara zilizofua dafu na zinamilikiwa na familia.
Working with the family.
Kufanya kazi na familia si rahisi. Manake wakati mwingine wanakufinya na pia wana matarajio mengi.
They expect much from you.
Ungana nami Vanessa Ndavi ndani ya TV47, tutalii bahari hii pamoja.
Twende sasa.
Nipe countdown. 2, 1.
Na kuletea matangazo moja kwa moja kutoka kongamano la 6 la ugatuzi hapa Kirinyaga County.
Hapa ni mjini Meru.
Tupo katika eneo la Wetavia, kaunti ya Kiambu.
Hivi leo tuko Nairobi Cinema.
Hapa ni Kina, ukipenda Kinango.
Usiwache hiyo timu ipotee.
Kama huyu amekataa, tafuta mwingine, maisha isonge mbele.
Mabadiliko haya yangali yanazua msuke baina ya washikadau.
Baadhi ya changamoto hizo zilikuwa ni kama vile ukosefu wa maarifa.
Wameweza kupeperusha bendera ya Kenya.
Tutaingia kwenye mapumziko kidogo.
Chavi! Na hii, mpenzi mtazamaji, ndio
TV47,
macho na sauti yetu.
Media freedom, and just a reminder of who my guests are. Mary Kio, Director at Roshani Consultancy Services, and David Kenneth Kaunda, a communication consultant and a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. David, before we went for a break, we were heavily debating whether one should be part of the story or not. Given that the story is distant from the journalists themselves, why should we be part of the story as we finalize on this subtopic?
Given that, repeat it again.
Given that the story is distant, it's not so near to me or dear to me as a journalist, why should I be near to the story?
Because you want to tell the story. Your role as a journalist is to tell the story, to tell the story, to get people, to give the people the right to know, right?
And can I not give them a right to know without being part of that story?
Without being part of the story.
Emotionally connected to that story for this matter.
An emotional connection to that story makes the story subjective.
We should base our reportage on facts and leave them to facts.
You have to base it on facts and leave it on facts.
Mary, you talked of media trainings that companies offer to journalists. We talked of whether they are good or bad for them. What do you think is the challenge of media houses training their own journalists in areas of interest and expertise? The challenge this time?
Well, I think the assumption here is that I wouldn't be quite an authority to speak on that. Reason being because our background is in journalism. So we usually work with media institutions that are keen on training on particular issues. So I just first wanted to say we don't represent companies, we represent journalism organizations that conduct trainings for journalists. And so with that having clarified, but now I don't know whether you want me to still look at it from our eyes or you want me to look at generally.
Generally, objectively.
Generally, okay, objectively from other companies coming on board is because they do not have an understanding of what is required of journalists in telling their stories. For them, they have their targets, they have their interests, like he was mentioning before that. And these interests, if they are pushed with an agenda of, for instance, if I was to come through and say, I'm going to take you through a training and we're going to give you funding for the next 6 months, to run with these stories, a media house would run with it because who doesn't want revenue coming on board? So that brings in challenges in terms of how the content is covered because they're like, well, they're giving us the money and we'll give them the space to speak as much as they want to. Then after 6 months, we can go back to business as usual. So at the end of the day, the audience who are supposed to be benefiting from their conversations may only benefit if it's paid up kind of engagement. But I believe if training is conducted within media houses and helping them to see why this content is important, and they see why it's important for the audience, then it becomes a sustainable venture. But when it's a hit and run kind of situation, we're just teaching you this for now and then we go and whatever you do with it, that's yours. But when it's audience centered, then it has a long shelf because it will outlast even those who have been within the media house for many years.
David, I want us to intentionally deviate from the topic a little bit.
I still have a
but you will raise your point on that. David, you are an academic. You teach journalism at the University of Nairobi. Why does it seem as though there is a disconnect between the academia that teaches journalism and the industry that practices journalism? Do you first of all believe there is a disconnect? Let me put
there's a disconnect because, first of all, when you get out of the classroom, you throw ethics out of the window. There's a disconnect because different organizations have got, different news organizations have got different editorial policies. Yeah? And that's why this particular media house back in 2017 had to fire a number of staff who went against the editorial policy. And up to now, the media house I'm talking about hasn't recovered because everyone who was good went away, went to a leading media house somewhere because they felt their creativity and their professionalism was being infringed on. So they left as an entire broadcast team to go and join the competitor. That is because they felt the views won't match the editorial policy. That's one fact that creates the disconnect. The other fact that creates the disconnect is, yes, I'm trained in journalism, but I need money. And to pay my bills, I need money to survive, and I need professional growth. Therefore, I must do things that will give me money, no things that will keep me as a professional.
And the disconnect here, in my reference, is that the media feels distant. The operational media feels distant from the scholars. Is the media using the scholars enough?
Kenyan media, no. If you talk about international media houses like the BBC, Sky News, and Al Jazeera, yes, they use scholars, but Kenyan media, no. Kenyan media doesn't have discourse to always call upon scholars. Kenyan media is more of a populist, uses a populist approach. We'll rather have celebrity comedians on a discussion than give a discussion an objective angle.
David, clearly you're pointing fingers at the media, but let me point fingers at the academia as well. Yes, the media may have wittingly or unwittingly ignored you. What is the academia doing to make sure that it supplements the industry itself?
I mean, the academia is what trains you people. So once you're trained by the academy, you're then supposed to instill values in the industry. That's why you went to DESTA, because you believe DESTA trains journalism with values. Yes? But these values, when you come to the industry, you cannot implement them because you lose your job.
Then is it a case of you guys teaching us something wrong?
Oh,
or teaching the students something wrong? If at all you're teaching us these are the values to be used and they can be practiced in the industry.
We are teaching journalism for a utopian society, let me say.
Which is a failure of academia, isn't it then? We agree on that.
Utopian societies, there are a few societies that are close to utopian society. Societies like the United States, for example, has the First Amendment that gives media freedom to any news outlet to do whatever it is it wants to do. Because I believe freedom is an avenue for society to thrive. If today we have a free society in terms of information, Kenya will be at a different level.
Good.
May you allow me to interject on that just a little bit?
Before you do that, let me ask the question, then you interject on that point. We talk of a free media and a responsible media. Many a times, the notion that is in the public display is that we are a free media. Where does responsibility in journalism come in?
Responsibility comes when you leave the classroom. No, I'm just...
No,
let me just finish up on that. Because there's one thing about where responsibility comes in is when you're met with real situations. It's one thing to sit in class and say, you know, this is where your freedoms stop. This is not what you're allowed to put on air. But when you go to your media house, you're dictated by the guidelines that you're given by your media house. So if that media house, for instance, like in the case where I shared earlier on, they decided we could use pictures of dead bodies as a front page, dictates on that day, as much as you know your responsibility as a journalist is not to expose that picture, you have to follow the guidelines of the particular media house at that point. Yes.
Throw away what David and the scholars are teaching you. Use what is in that media.
Because at the end of the day, that's where your meal is going to come from. You know, they're the ones who are, we go back to the conversation of buttering your bread. Who butters your bread and what they say is allowed. Should
we give prominence to butter than substance in a newsroom?
No, we shouldn't. And I'll give an example of that. There's and this story I share it because the person allowed me to share it, is that this particular journalist arrived at a scenario where he had been told there's an accident which had affected very high political people within a neighboring country, and they went to report on an accident that had happened. It was actually a plane that fell down. And he was the first one to arrive. And when he did, a lot of things were, he was trying to reach out to his dad. It was a pilot. It was a plane accident. So he was trying to reach out to his dad and find out, hi dad, you know, how is it going, that kind of thing. But he hadn't been able to get through to him. And the moment he arrived and saw the plane, it was the kind of planes that his dad used to fly. And based on that, he was like, that was the most biggest story in the world that I never broke as a journalist because of one, it didn't even require any responsibility or anything. It was too personal for me. And for him, he said he allowed it for somebody else to say it. So that's why I say in terms of freedoms, saying that we need to be impartial when you're out there. Scenarios on the ground make it really, I mean, you have to make decisions based on what you find on the ground and what you can deal with.
Good. David, where then do we draw the line between chest thumping that we are a free entity and being humbled by the reality that we should be responsible?
You must remember that freedom comes with responsibility, right? Like you, when you turn 18, you supposedly free, right? You're now an adult. You're able to make your own decisions, blah blah blah. But that freedom doesn't come at an expense of responsibility. Freedom and responsibility go together, right? Well, even though I'm responsible, even though I'm free, there's certain things that I shouldn't do just because I'm free, right?
And why shouldn't a journalist do things that are professionally in line with a story or an event that they are covering? Doesn't that allude to the point of censoring oneself?
No, if something is done professionally, then it is right. If it is done professionally, it is right and okay to do it. Yeah. But then if you have interest in a certain story, allow someone else to come and cover the story.
One will say that is ideal. And Mary will be quick as well to say that is not what happens in the industry, which again questions that the content the academia is teaching the journalists who are going through the ranks.
No.
Let me finish my question. That the content the academia is teaching journalists who are coming through the ranks to the newsroom seems to be in mismatch with the reality in our newsrooms.
I'm to say this. That is a perception you're having. It is not real. In developed nations, freedom comes with responsibility. That's why before you go on air with news or pieces of news, you have to have verified. You have to have done it objectively enough. That's why all of you have aspirations of working for organizations like BBC or have working for organizations
mine is to work
like,
for TV47, which I'm already doing.
Like
fair enough.
CNN. But this comes with responsibility. It comes with you being professional enough and worth it. It is rumored that a Kenyan who once worked with an international news media forgot about professionalism when he was covering a certain story in some part of Africa. He had to lose his job because he wasn't professional enough.
David, in your discussion, you are pointing out to progressive nations, developed nations, and looking backward at Kenyan journalists. You have a right to do that. As we finalize, Mary, let me get your thoughts on this. In the 21st century, where fake news seemingly is the order of the day, how can journalists, individual journalists, survive in such a landscape?
Goes back to the basic values of journalism. So long as make sure that you verify, make sure that you are, it's truth. Make sure that you have sources that can back up your story, and make sure that you are maintaining the impartiality aspect to it. Those are the 4 things I will stand by from the beginning up to this point.
Finally, David, the same question. How can a journalist survive in an era of fake news, in an era of new media?
It's more about being objective and knowing your role as a journalist. That is what makes you a professional.
Well, David Kenneth Kaunda, a communication consultant, a lecturer at Nairobi University, Mary Kio, a director at Roshani Consultancy Services. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for making time for us.
Thank you.
And I hope this discussion is of benefit to us as the media before anyone else. Well, that brings us to the end of today's edition of Newsroom. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Up next is Paul Kirobi with Matukio Nyanjani. Stay tuned.
Bila shaka mtaka cha mvunguni shati ainame. Hivi ndivyo mambo yalivyo katika kuanza na kuboresha biashara. Kipindi cha biashara za familia kitaangazia biashara zilizofua dafu na zinamilikiwa na familia.
Working with the family.
Kufanya kazi na familia si rahisi. Manake wakati mwingine wanakufinya na pia wana matarajio mengi.
They expect much from you.
Ungana nami Vanessa Ndavi ndani ya TV47, tutalii bahari hii pamoja.
punde sasa.
Nipe countdown. 2, 1.
Na kuletea matangazo moja kwa moja kutoka kongamano la 6 la ugatuzi hapa Kirinyaga County.
Hapa ni mjini Meru.
Tupo katika eneo la Wetavia County ya Kiambu.
Hivi leo tuko Nairobi Cinema.
Hapa ni Kina, ukipenda Kinango.
Usiwache hiyo timu ipotee.
Kama huyu amekataa, tafuta mwingine, maisha isonge mbele.
Mabadiliko haya yangali yanazua msuke baina ya washikadau.
Baadhi ya changamoto hizo zilikuwa ni kama vile ukosefu wa maarifa.
Wameweza kupeperusha bendera ya Kenya.
Tutaingia kwenye mapumziko kidogo.
Chavi! Na hii, mpenzi mtazamaji, ndio
TV47,
macho na sauti yetu.
Ndoa yao ilianza kwa changamoto si haba.
Nilipomwambia awapee dada zangu mtoto, alikataa akidai kwamba atakuwa akienda naye hotelini asubuhi, mchana na jioni.
Ama kwa hakika ni heri nusu shari kuliko shari kamili.
Anasaidia nyumbani kama baba yule mwingine anatushughulikia.
Ni yapi masaibu ya hivi majuzi?
Sasa ile kitu ilikuwa shida kwa sisi ni kutafuta neurosurgeon.
Nikamrudisha tena kwa yule daktari na akafanyiwa operesheni ya pili.
Hii ni sehemu ya pili ya juzuu ya Kipendacho Moyo, makala ya dunia ya pili. Nami ni Wabugo Yusuf.
Twende sasa.
Nipe countdown. 2, 1.
Nakuletea matangazo moja kwa moja kutoka kongamano la 6 la ugatuzi hapa Kirinyaga County.
Hapa ni mjini Meru.
Tupo katika eneo la Wetavia County ya Kiambu.
Hivi leo tuko Nairobi Cinema.
Hapa ni Kina, ukipenda Kinango.
Usiwache hiyo timu ipotee.
Kama huyu amekataa, tafuta mwingine, maisha isonge mbele.
Mabadiliko haya yangali yanazua msuke baina ya washikadau.
Baadhi ya changamoto hizo zilikuwa ni kama vile ukosefu wa maarifa.
Wameweza kupeperusha bendera ya Kenya.
Tutaingia kwenye mapumziko kidogo.
Chazi! Na hii, mpenzi mtazamaji, ndio
TV47,
macho na sauti yetu.
Bila shaka mtaka cha mvunguni shati ainame. Hivi ndivyo mambo yalivyo katika kuanza na kuboresha biashara. Kipindi cha biashara za familia kitaangazia biashara zilizofua dafu na zinamilikiwa na familia.
Working with the family.
Kufanya kazi na familia si rahisi. Manake wakati mwingine wanakufinya na pia wana matarajio mengi.
They expect much from you.
Ungana nami Vanessa Ndavi ndani ya TV47, tutalii bahari hii pamoja.
Mix. Let's go.
Hewa safi na harufu nzuri, harufu ya mchai, mlozi na mkaltusi. Mafuta katika karakana ya Jeffrey Okapaeleka huko Lagos. Mnejera huyo mwenye umri wa miaka 30 anachanganya idadi ya mchanganyiko muhimu wa mafuta. Hali hii inamfanya kuwa muuzaji bora katika nyanja ya vipodozi kwa jina Beard and Butter. Okapaeleka alianza kukuza ndevu mwaka 2012 akifuata mkondo wa dunia unavyokwenda, akiona wanaume wanaofuga ndevu wakijipanga katika mitandao ya kijamii na mandevu kwa kauli ya #Beard Gang au kwa lugha ya Kiswahili gengi la madevu.
In Nigeria, what I know is that so many people need beard grooming products, especially oils.
Hapa Nigeria, ninachojua ni kuwa watu wengi wanahitaji bidhaa za mafuta ya kukuza ndevu. Sana sana, wanaume wa Nigeria wana ndevu zinakaa kama mchele na maharagwe. Ukichana, unaumia. Ni ngumu kuchana. na hawajui kama kuna bidhaa hapa Nigeria ambazo wanaweza kutumia kusuluhisha matatizo ya wanaume.
Male hair conundrums.
Alikuwa Uingereza akichagua bidhaa za nywele za wanaume. Aliporudi Nigeria, alipata bidhaa za mafuta zimeelekezwa kwa wanawake pekee. Okupeleka alianzisha kampuni ya Beard and Butter